Baseball fans, it is time once again for another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. With over 50 years in professional baseball and making a multitude of fantastic relationships along the way, Frank Coppenbarger shares great stories with weekly guests from various areas inside of the game. It's all here on the Fans First Sports Network. Let's get ready to play ball. Here's Frank Coppenbarger.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. And today's show is going to be a real Thanksgiving treat. I have been so excited about doing this show for the last year and a half. I've been a podcaster, and this was like the number one name I put on my list, and just getting a hold of him is the hardest part. But Terry Francona, the great manager of the Cincinnati Reds, is our guest, and Tito, nobody calls him Terry. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Frankie. Golly, this is something I don't think either one of us would have ever thought was going to happen. Me being a manager and you being a TV star. I
know. Well, I don't know about the star, but there's one star on this podcast, and it ain't me. It's you. But anyway, Tito, Cincinnati Reds manager, currently sitting at 2017 career wins. I remember your first one, buddy. Unbelievable. What a career, and counting.
Well, the first one, I remember after that first game in L.A., Shill pitched 8, Ricky Battaligo pitched the 9th, and I thought, man, this is going to be easy. Then I don't think we won a game for about 2 weeks after that.
It was tough. Well, you won a lot of them after that. 3 times the American League Manager of the Year. And we're going to get to all that, but we're going to start kind of from the start. Born in Aberdeen, South Dakota. Was that a minor league stop for your dad in his long career?
Frankie, that's exactly what it was. It was Class D ball back then. It was the Aberdeen Pheasants. The manager was a guy named Zeke Strange. That was my mother's brother-in-law.
Oh, how about that?
I was born in Aberdeen. We spent about 2 years there, and even probably now today, it's not easy to get there. You can imagine 60 something years ago. So we moved back to Western Pennsylvania where my dad grew up, and it was culture shock for my mom, but it was a lot easier for everybody, just to get places.
Right. Well, for the fans that may not know, Terry's father, Tito Francona, was a 15-year major league player and a really good player. And he had a long career, played with several teams. Terry, talk about that, being the son of a big leaguer a little bit, if you would.
Frankie, you know me for a long time, how proud I am of my father. I thought it was a really normal way to grow up. And I know it wasn't, but I think that's a lot of because of the way my parents handled it. We didn't get ice cream when he got hits, and we didn't have to walk on eggshells when he was 0 for 4. One of my funnest things is when I came into the league, some of the clubhouse guys that were still around, they made a point of coming up to me, and they'd always tell me, man, Terry, your dad was one of my favorites. I never got tired of hearing that. And when people call me Tito, I'm proud of it because of how much I love my dad.
Absolutely. What a great guy. And I had the pleasure of getting to know him and even spend some time with him, some holidays. And we might bring that up a little later on.
I kind of figured that might come up.
Anyway, first as a player, out of high school in New Brighton, Pennsylvania, you went to the University of Arizona. You're pretty darn good, buddy. 1980 Golden Spikes Award winner. That's the College Player of the Year, ladies and gentlemen. College World Series champions, and you were the World Series most outstanding player. Talk about that experience a little bit there at the College World Series.
Well, Frankie, a couple things. One, it's amazing what the aluminum bat can do, because once I got to wood, it didn't quite go as well. But it was probably the best decision I ever made. Back then in 1980 or 1977, when you leave home, man, you're leaving home. I mean, there's no cell phones. It's a big culture shock. but I wanted to be a good baseball player. And coming out here and playing for Jerry Kindle and those guys, they taught us the right way to play baseball. They taught us to respect the game, but they also taught us to respect the people in the game. And when you're 18, 19 years old, those are pretty valuable lessons.
No question. So one of the guys you met, and it was your teammate at the University of Arizona, you couldn't have imagined that for the next 45 years of your life, you basically would be standing next to each other. Brad Mills. And he was a little bit older than you, right?
He was a junior college transfer when he came in. We came in the same year, but he was 2 years ahead of me.
2 years ahead of you in school. It's probably a good thing. He probably helped you with your homework too. So this is a classic Oscar Madison, Felix Unger story. And I'll let you guess who is who, but I'll just tell you, Brad Mills is Felix Unger.
Frankie, you know what's so funny you bring that up? Do you know today, I got a thing on my phone today that said it's Felix Unger Day.
That's unbelievable. That must be Brad Mills' birthday.
I took that and I sent it to all our coaches and to Millsy because I would call him that every day in our meetings, and everybody laughed except him.
Yeah.
And I had to send it today because it's so true. And yeah, I was probably the other guy for sure.
Well, that's so funny. But anyway, Brad and you were teammates there. Then you both went to the Montreal Expos organization together, which is really unbelievable that you end up in the same organization. Came through the farm system. You didn't spend very long in the minor leagues. You went right from college to AA, which is pretty much unheard of. And a year later, you were in AAA for a little bit, and then you were in the big leagues in 1981. Just a year out of college. Talk about that.
Well, it's funny because the day I went to Memphis was the day Millsy actually got called up from Memphis straight to the major leagues.
Oh, wow.
And then the next year he got sent back to AAA and I went to AAA and we were together. Frankie, your first team is always more like family than anything else. Once you get traded or released, you understand the business part of it, and I get it. But your first team is kind of like family. And then to have guys like Millsy and Tim Wallach, we were, Scott Sanderson, we were all so close. And we didn't know any better. We just showed up and played baseball and had fun. And, we didn't know about the business part of the game. And it was actually kind of a lot more fun that way.
Well, you guys were really tight, particularly you and Wallach and Mills, the three of you. And I met all of you in Springfield, Illinois, where I was running the clubhouse for the Cardinals AAA team, and you guys came in with the mighty Denver Bears, the Expos AAA team. And I know you want to get on me about having a Coke machine and all that kind of stuff.
I was just going to say, I probably got on you for 30 years after that because I had to put money in the Coke machine. Frankie, times have changed.
Times have changed. Now you've got chefs in the clubhouse.
You're not kidding.
You got beds to sleep on. You name it, they have it. But anyway, we had a lot of fun back in those days. But that's when I first met Tito and Brad Mills, who was his coach when he later on became the Phillies manager. But Terry was a good player. He'll tell you he wasn't a good player, but he had two pretty big knee injuries that really derailed his career. One of them, sadly, I was there to witness, which was in St. Louis. I had the chance to work up with the big league team by then, and he got hurt out on the warning track trying to play a fly ball, and the spikes got caught and messed his knee up pretty bad. And honestly and fairly, you never really were the same player after those.
Frankie, I tell people all the time, I was really fortunate to get parts of 10 years in the major leagues, but the last 9.5, I was hanging on by a thread.
Yeah.
And then when I hurt my knee, the other knee, a couple years later, it was tough. I was just trying to find a way to make myself valuable enough to be on a team. But you know what? Things work out for kind of crazy reasons. And I sat the bench a lot and I wasn't real happy doing it, but I watched and I moved around and I played for different managers, different organizations, and you see how people do things. And I I've never been accused of being the smartest person in the world, but I was smart enough to keep my eyes open, and I watched everything, and it was really helpful.
So when you started being relegated to be a bench player, do you think that's in your mind when you started thinking maybe I'll go into coaching and being a manager?
No, not at all.
Really?
No, I just, I love the game so much, and I never wanted to be surprised. Like I can tell, I would sit there with my helmet and my bat, and when a manager wanted me to pinch hit, I was always ahead of them. Now, there's probably a lot of times when they didn't want me to hit, and I thought, well, I could probably do it. But it just, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was getting me ready for maybe a second, a second career in coaching and managing, because I was always trying to think ahead with the manager.
Yeah. Well, you played, in addition to the Expos, you were with the Cubs, the Reds, the Indians, as they were known back then, and the Brewers. Anything stand out from those experiences, a manager or a teammate that you could share with us?
Well, I played for some really, really good managers. Guys in Montreal, in fact, he had to let me go, but Buck Rogers, I thought, I was probably the 26th man on a 25-man team, and he made me feel important. And I'll never forget that. Guys like, Tom Troublehorn, who, they were so organized, and they tried to make the work enjoyable. Playing with Pete Rose and for Pete Rose. I tell people all the time, I'm glad I never have to be a decision maker, because I have no chance of not being biased when it comes to Pete.
Was he the player manager when you were with the Reds?
No. I played with him in Montreal.
Okay.
Then he was done playing. He kept threatening he was going to come back. And I think that was because I was hitting about 220 the whole year. And he kept saying, I'm going to come back because I know I can hit better than you.
Oh, my gosh. This is what we're going to be doing for the next 30 minutes, folks. That's so Terry right there.
True, Frankie.
Well, he was a pretty good hitter, there's no doubt. But I do know that he was player manager for a while.
Yeah,
I just couldn't remember when. And you played with the Indians and the Brewers, and your dad played with both those teams.
And that's funny, because I think that's why Mr. Seelig was always so good to me, because his first, when they moved in 1970 from Seattle, that was their first team. My dad was on that team, and then 2 decades later, I'm there, and I'm sure he's probably, he thought that was really cool. And I always thought that was neat. And so every time he'd come to town, he'd always find a way to come in and say hello. And I love that.
Well, when a guy can't really play at the top level anymore, and he still lasts for 10 years, there's one big reason why, and that's because they're a really good guy and they're no problem and a good teammate, and that describes you perfectly.
Well, that I can't tell you how much I appreciate you saying that, because in my world, the best compliment isn't that you say somebody's the best player, but when you call somebody a good teammate, that goes a long way with me, and that's something I really, really respect in people.
Well, I can tell just from being around you for 4 years as a manager and a lot of years after that, you learned a lot from a lot of those managers you had before, like you say, Buck Rogers and guys like that, and how to manage people and how to deal with people. I swear, this guy, Terry Francona, is the ultimate players manager. Somehow they all like him and seem to like him every day. Even when maybe they don't really like him that day, they still come across like they do.
Well, it's probably not everybody, Frankie, I'm sure. But you know what? I try hard to not make stuff up, not throw stuff against the wall. I think there's a way to be honest with players with not beating them over the head.
Yeah.
And I think you pick your spots. And again, we've all made mistakes, and there's all things we'd like to have do-overs. But I try to create an environment where the players enjoy doing the right thing. And I think if you can do that, you're kind of ahead of the game.
Well, I've seen you, when you were managing the Red Sox, for example, and you'll yell for David Ortiz to come in and ask him if he took his ugly pill today. And I'm standing right there and falling over laughing. and he's laughing harder than I am. I mean, you just you got a great way about you, and that makes you a good manager also, in addition to knowing the game.
Well, thanks, Frank. You know what? I being around the players, I don't think I've ever tried to hide it. It's fun. And don't get me wrong, there are days when you got to deliver difficult messages, and that will never get in the way. But I don't try to hide the fact that when you're around players, that's why we do this. And you get fond of them when you're around them. And like I said, I don't try to hide that.
Well, you're an expert at that. There's no doubt about it. We're going to get into your managing career in just a minute, but let's take a break, and we'll be back with Terry Francona in just a minute. All right, we're back with Tito Francona, and it's time to move from being a player to being a manager. So when you were finished playing, you got a job in the White Sox organization. How did that come about?
Well, so the Buddy Bell, who had been my roommate when I was with the Reds, he took over the minor leagues for the White Sox, and he had called me that winter, and he goes, "Tito, you ready to start, coaching or managing?" And I said, "Buddy, man," I said, I had a knee surgery, I had a wrist surgery, and I had a shoulder surgery, and I said, I worked so damn hard this winter, I just want to go see if I can play again. So I actually went to minor league camp with the Cardinals.
I remember that.
And got released at the end of camp, came home, and I can remember this like it was yesterday. I was sitting on my couch here in Tucson watching Gilligan's Island. And my wife looked at me and she was like, "Are you going to do this for the rest of your life?" So I went and signed up for a class to get my realtor's license. And about halfway through the class, Buddy Bell called and he's like, "Are you ready?" And I took my books up to the teacher and I go, "Sir, nobody's going to buy a house from me." I go, "Give these books to somebody." I flew down to Sarasota the next morning, and it was the smartest thing I ever did.
Well, there's no doubt it worked out for you, but I think you'd have been a pretty good realtor too. Frankie, it's just the way you got about you. You'd have been fine.
Frankie, I don't think that was going to work, man. The only thing I remember is the three words that you location.
It sounds like you're talking about pitching.
Yeah. I learned that fast too.
Right. So now you go with the White Sox, and your first outpost was where?
I was the hitting instructor in rookie ball in Sarasota. Okay. And I'll tell you what, Frankie, I know nowadays, guys are getting jobs now right straight out of playing. I wouldn't have been equipped to handle that. I got to be a coach for the first year, which I learned stuff. Like, remember the first bus ride we got on in South Bend, somebody was like, "Hey, who's got the bats?" And I'm like, "Well, the clubby, we don't have a clubby, So it was like, and this is where Millsy used to laugh at me all the time because I didn't understand how that stuff worked. And I certainly wasn't the most organized person, but I got to make mistakes and learn, and they weren't on SportsCenter. And it helps.
Well, you were the number one pick of the Expos, so they had somebody else carrying the bats.
I just knew they showed up when we got there. I didn't know how
right. That's how we work behind the scenes in the cloak of darkness. But anyway, you end up being a manager in the White Sox organization. I think you managed in South Bend too, didn't you?
Yeah, my first year was in South Bend, and then the next 3 years were in Birmingham.
Yeah, well, while you were in Birmingham, you had a lot of good players, and several of those ended up coming to Philadelphia later on. But you had arguably one of the most famous athletes in the world playing baseball for you, none other than Michael Jordan, and you had the responsibility of being his manager for an entire season. Talk about that.
Frankie, my life changed. My baseball life changed like in an instant. I can remember in Sarasota, we had a 7 a.m. meeting in the trailer, all the player development people. And I was half asleep, normal. And all of a sudden, my ears perked up and they said, Jordan has been assigned to the Birmingham work group. And when the door opened to go outside, there was already media there.
Oh.
And it taught me so, like, I didn't know it at the time. I was just trying to survive, but it taught me how to be organized, how to maybe talk to the media a little bit better. Because our days got so busy and everybody wanted a piece of everybody there. And it was the best learning experience I could ever have been put in.
Oh, absolutely. So while you're in Birmingham, you're the Southern League Manager of the Year. You were Baseball America's Minor League Manager of the Year. A lot of these things sound just like they did when you came out of college as a player. You're the Man of the Year. You can do it.
Well, I think maybe there was some voters like, Ray Charles or Helen Keller. Or
Oh, my gosh. So now you manage in the White Sox organization. And then Buddy Bell gets the job as the Detroit Tigers manager, and he makes you the third base coach in 1996. And you went over, and as a coach for him, you guys had a tough year. Not a good year for the Tigers for sure. Had nothing to do with the manager or the coaches, but a tough year. But it worked out pretty nicely because you got an opportunity that winter to be the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, and talk about that a little bit.
Frankie, I was driving home from Detroit back to Tucson, and I got a call from Randy Smith, who was the general manager, and I thought, oh my God, I'm getting fired, because we had lost, I think, 111 games. And he goes, Tito, who do you know in Philadelphia? And I said, man, I don't think anybody. He goes, well, they want to interview you for their manager's job. And I was like, what? And so I talked to Buddy Bell, and he was great. And I learned so much from Buddy, as you know. And he goes, Tito, do it. He goes, you're not ready. He goes, you won't get it. He goes, but it'd be really good for you to go through the interview process. So I said, okay. Shoot, man, about 3 weeks later, I was the manager. And I mean, you talk about things happening fast. Remember, one of your favorites of all time and mine, Lee Thomas, who is he's just a big teddy bear.
Gave us both our chance. Yeah.
I remember asking him one time after, I go, Lee, how the heck did you come up with with me? And he goes, well, I came out to the fall league, and he goes, you probably don't even remember, but I came down and I got an autographed Jordan ball. I said, Lee, if I'd have known you did that, I'd have got you a bat and a glove and everything else too.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty funny because I had a great relationship with Lee. I was brought over by him to the Phillies, and he was our minor league director with the Cardinals. And he was actually the traveling secretary of the Cardinals before that, which I find that shocking. But nonetheless, he was, and then ended up being the farm director, gets the Phillies job. He brings me over there, and then Nick Leyva's the manager. That doesn't work out. Fregosi manages for 4 years. When his time came, then it's opportunity for somebody else. And one day, Lee says to me, walking through the clubhouse, he used to come down every day at lunchtime, I think, just to get away from the phone and the agents and all that stuff. And he goes, you got any ideas for a manager for me? And I said, yeah, I do. And I don't know if I've ever told you this or not, but I said, Chuck Cottier, who had managed the Mariners, and I knew he was really well liked by all the players when he was managing the Cubs. He goes, that's a really interesting name. So now 3 weeks later, you're the manager and Chuck Cottier's your bench coach. So I think I might have had a slight hand in nudging you to make Chuck the bench coach.
Well, if that's the case, I owe you a big thanks because, I mean, I was, I think the term they use now is drinking out of a hose. It was going so fast. And I didn't know Chuck. And Chuck flew down to Tucson. And after about 10 minutes, we were like brothers.
Yeah.
And he looked out for me. He had managed before. He had coached forever. He didn't want to manage again. And he he protected me. I learned more from him. He was so good to me, and I'll never forget that because, man, like you get a job and you'd like to think you're prepared, but not going through it, I'm not sure anybody can ever be fully prepared, especially to be in Philly and especially on a team that's not very good.
Right. That's a tough place to start, and especially with the makeup of the roster that you inherited when you took over the team, no doubt. You had a couple good players, but about 23 that weren't very good. So. But I want to go back to Michael Jordan. Give us a couple good Jordan stories.
Oh, Frankie, I have so many.
I'm gonna tee it up for you.
Okay.
So you had this bat boy in Birmingham named Bo Landreth.
Yeah.
And you brought him over. In fact, when we played down there, he bat boyed for us.
Sure did.
And then you brought him to Atlanta a couple times, and you really liked this kid. He was a special needs young man.
Yeah.
And was always around the ballpark there in Birmingham, loves Terry. And you told me the story one night about the Nerf basketball hoop in the Birmingham clubhouse, and Jordan's a player, and you take it from there.
Well, they did. They would clear out some room over there, and they would play the Nerf ball. I think Bo took like 17 charges in a row. Every time I looked up, Bo's in the locker, and he was so proud of himself because he took a charge
from Jordan.
He had like a lump on his head from where he was hitting his head. I mean, I still talk to Bo, Frankie.
Yeah, do you really?
Heck yeah. So one of my favorite stories with Michael is I lived in I had four kids and making $28,000. So the apartment complex I lived in it had a full length blacktop basketball court with chain nets. And we're coming back from Huntsville, and Mike Barnett and Champ were our pitching coach and our hitting guy. And they were going back and forth about who could play basketball better. They both stunk. And they were going, and Michael's ears perked up. And I'm like, oh boy. So we get back from the road trip and we go out to the basketball court, and it's me, Champ, Barney, and Michael. And we're just shooting around. And I found out quickly, anything with Michael, word travels fast. And all of a sudden, there's guys from the neighborhood that are coming by.
Oh my.
And they want to play. And Michael's like, I'll play. So, Michael takes the coaches against anybody. There was a kid that he was probably about 6'6". He's a little older. You could tell he had played. And he's kind of getting rough with Michael. And I'm getting nervous about this.
Yeah, I bet.
Finally, Michael's had enough. And he's at the top of the key, and he's got the ball right here. And he told the guy, he goes, I'm going right there. And I'm like, oh, man, this isn't good. So I run over, try to set a pick. And he has the ball right here. And he goes, get out of here. So I kind of go back. He takes one dribble, and he leaves the ground. And I'm like, oh, man, this is awful. Next thing I know, the rim's bent, and he's standing over this guy. And he's like, don't ever talk to me in my house. And I'm like, game time. Game's over.
That's outstanding. What a great story. So getting back to your managerial stuff now, the Phillies manager in 97 for 4 years. When that ends up, the next year you take a job in the Cleveland, as they were known then, the Indians front office. I'm guessing to kind of just to keep you occupied and give you something to do. 02, you're a coach for the Rangers. 03, you're a coach for Oakland. And ironically, you were the interim manager. I think your manager was Maka then.
Yes, it was.
I think he had a graduation or a wedding or something, and you managed in Philly. So I don't know if you recall this or not, but Steve Vucinich, who was my guest a couple weeks ago, we were laughing about this. You used to send up to the clubhouse when you were the Phillies manager for me to come down like it was something really important. and then you would like give a sign to the third base coach and say, what do we got to eat after the game? So you asked me if I was going to come down to the dugout. Well, I did. I had my khaki pants on, and I borrowed an A's jacket, and I walked down to the dugout in the middle of the game while you're managing and told you what the visiting team was going to eat after the game. Went back over to the Philly side.
And remember, Vu said they made me a helmet in case people started throwing stuff at me.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember. So after you coached for the A's in 2003, big opportunity comes about. Manager of the Boston Red Sox. Talk about that one.
Frankie, in 2003, when I went to Oakland, Billy Beane said to me, and he said it in passing, I thought, he goes, Tito, if we have a good year, he goes, you'll manage again. And it was kind of I thought like a flippant remark, didn't really think about it, but he was right, because we get to the playoffs. In fact, we lost to Boston, and, it was they were rarely do you interview with a team that's ready to win. Usually you're interviewing because lost 100 games or something. This team was really ready to win. They were just a little short on pitching, and they went out and got Keith Falk, the closer, and they got Schill as another dominant pitcher. And I was fortunate enough to get that job. And it was, you talk about ready to win. There was a cast of characters there, but they like to play baseball.
Yeah. So now 2004, your first year, I'm with the Phillies. We go in there, and I can't remember. It must have been a day off in between. And I asked you if you'd like to go have a little lunch, early lunch. And you said yes. So you came down and met me. We were staying at the Sheraton Boston, and we're walking down the street. And some guy in a truck drives by and yells, "Hey, Francona," and flips you off. And you laughed and said, "See, they love me already." Well, about 8 months later, you won the World Series. And as soon as the last out was made, that's the first thing I thought of. I wonder what that guy's thinking tonight.
I can probably take it a step further. This is back before they had done everything in the stadium. So after the playoff games, you had to take a golf cart around the warning track, go all the way to left field to the media room. And after game 3 to the Yankees, where we got beat by like a touchdown and a field goal, people were pelting me with stuff, like throwing stuff. And you can imagine what they were saying. Oh, yeah. And then a week later, it's like you could run for mayor. It's the funniest damn thing I've ever seen.
You went from that to being more well-known than Paul Revere in a week. Unbelievable. So anyway, you won the World Series again in 2007. You were in the playoffs a bunch of times. You were the only manager, and still are, to win his first, actually, 9 World Series games. You swept in 2004, you swept in 2007, and then in 2016, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, you actually won game 1 of that World Series when you were managing Cleveland. So backing up, you remained in Boston through 2011, took a year off, and you did something I thought you were really good at. Fox Broadcasting, you did that a little bit, filling in for Tim McCarver. And then you got a job with ESPN on Sunday Night Baseball and also the Little League World Series. And I thought you were awesome. And
thank you.
You just didn't have a uniform on it. You couldn't take it.
You know what, though? It was really good for me. To back up a little bit, Joe Buck called me, and who I had known him since, forever. And he goes, Tito, Tim can't do this. He's had some heart issues. I want you to come do this playoff game in Texas with me. And I said, Joe, are you crazy? I said, I can't do that. He goes, it'll be just like sitting in a bar talking about baseball. He knows I know you can do that. And he goes, I'll take care of the rest. Well, he did, like nobody's business. And it probably really helped me to get the job at ESPN. And it was with Dan Schulman and got people, they were so good to me. And I probably needed it because I was beat up. And it wasn't until about August that I actually started missing being in the clubhouse. And I think that's kind of telling. And right about when I started missing it, that's when the Cleveland thing came about. So the timing was just about perfect.
So the Indians come to you, offer you the job as manager, and they changed their name, but they didn't change the manager. You're there for 10 years. And one of the coolest things I remember was going over there when the Phillies played there, and I went into your office, and behind your desk was this huge picture of the old Indians players, which your dad was in the photo, and it was a father-kid game, and you were sitting cross-legged in front of him in your little Indians photo. Thought that was just a cool touch to your office.
Well, when I got the job, I went in, they showed me the office, and the last, manager taking all his stuff out.
Right.
So, and I didn't want to have stuff from Boston in there. That didn't seem like it made a whole lot of sense, especially since we had just beaten Cleveland. So when we came back from spring training, the guys had put 5 or 6 big pictures up of my dad, my mom, me, all in Indian stuff. And it meant the world to me. And it just was a nice way to start.
Really cool touch. Kudos to whoever thought of that. So 10 years with the Indians / Guardians, 2016 American League champions. You went to Game 7, and I think it was a battle of 2 teams that hadn't been in the World Series in so long, and it was even a crazy 7th game. But I think it was just the Cubs' time. Somehow the moons and the stars and everything lined up for that once a century championship for them, and they edged you out, but you still had a great season.
Frankie, you don't know how you're going to feel. I mean, obviously I wish we'd have got the last out and been able to have a parade, but pride won out over being sad, because our guys, we were so beat up. I think we had 2.5 starters. Guys were going on short rest. Andrew Miller was pitching every other hour. And, Brian Shaw, Cody Allen, and pride won out. I mean, naturally, I wish we'd have won, but that was about as prideful as I've ever been about a group of players.
Well, it was a really tough one for me because I always root for you, but the opposition was managed by Joe Madden, and I played with Joe Madden. In fact, you do that. So when Cartier was the manager of the Salinas Angels in 1978, Joe was one of our catchers, and I played the last game of the season, and I'm proud to say that I hit 3rd and he hit 7th.
To this day, I can hear Chuck calling you Ice Water. Hey, Ice Water.
Yeah.
And I would get the biggest kick out of that. Yeah. I would laugh so hard. He must have told me that story 100 times.
Oh, my. That was so funny. I mean, that was in Quad Cities when that started the year before. And I said to him, is there anything special you'd like to have after batting practice? And he's, I thought maybe he'd want something to eat or whatever. And he goes, just a big glass of ice water. So if I would forget, I'd hear him throughout the clubhouse, Frankie, ice water. And pretty soon that's what everybody called me, Ice Water.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Well, anyway, you had a variety of health issues that kind of stymied your time in Cleveland. You had to miss a lot of games at a couple different points. Your first lieutenant, Brad Mills, took over. You were just unable to really continue and decided to shut it down after the 23 season. Took a break, and once again, you just couldn't miss it. And chance to manage the Cincinnati Reds and talk about that.
Well, Frank, you know what? You're right. I was so beat up physically, and it took such a toll that it starts to kind of mess with you mentally too, like, your patience and things like that. And I couldn't do the job the way I wanted to. I felt like I was shortchanging people. And I told my bosses out in Cleveland, and they were so good about it. I just didn't feel right about it. And I stepped away, and I actually had a wonderful year. I think people don't believe me when I say that. I loved it. I mean, I babysat grandkids and I went on golf trips. And then the guys from the Reds, they actually flew out to my house, which blew me away. We talked about baseball. I was sitting in my rocking chair, and it felt so much like it did early in Cleveland. Like when you get to be my age, I think some of your ideas or wants change. And I wanted to be around people that I believed in and I knew would have my back. And that's what I felt right away talking to these guys with the Reds. And after being there for a year, it's only stronger. I love the people there.
Well, you did a bang-up job. You got that team in the postseason. And I know you'll give all the credit to the players, but a lot of that credit's got to go to you.
Our players, I mean, they're young, but they're try to do what you ask them to do. You know, we got a little bit of a tough draw when we got to the Dodgers, and we found out quickly that we're not the finished product. But that's okay. As long as our trajectory is going this way, that's okay.
Well, you'll remember this because you won the World Series in 2007, but the Phillies, we won our division in 2007. We were actually 7.5 games out with 17 to go and somehow caught and passed the Mets to win the East. And then we got swept by the Rockies in 3 games in the division series. And I think that really set the table for the next year. They got a taste of it, but they remembered what it tasted like in the end. And that drove them to the World Championship the very next year.
Frankie, I told our guys, I said, hey, don't forget how it felt popping that champagne. I said, but don't forget also how much it hurts when we lose.
Yeah.
And our guys, they're conscientious. I tell people all the time, we didn't have a person late for a meeting the entire season. That to me speaks volumes about the group.
Yeah.
And I love that about them. And I don't think that's going to change.
Well, that says they like being there and they like being on your team and being part of that team. And that's a big part of it. That chemistry is huge.
Just because you can't put a number on it doesn't mean it's not terribly important.
Yeah.
And you're right, it is. So
we're getting down to the end of our show, but I've got 3 stories I just have to share. We're going overtime, but ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you it's going to be worth it. So I want you to take a look at this gentleman on the screen because he lived a long ways from Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia. So when we had a day game after a night game, he would sleep in his office on an old air mattress that I had that somehow leaked over the course of the night. So it would be fully inflated. Terry would climb in there and get a blanket and a pillow, and he'd have all his Reese's peanut butter cups and potato chips and all his little snacks to get him through the night. And my orders were, when I got there in the morning and unlocked the clubhouse, to wake him up before anybody else got there. So I would wake him up, and that air mattress would be flat as a pancake by the time the night was over. You come a long way.
I'd have crumbs all over me.
My!
You know what though, Frankie? I don't think I could physically do it again. I wish I could, because I look back at some of those memories. We had so much fun. I mean, we had more fun than you're probably supposed to.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And the next one I'm going to tell you about involved a trip, and this was after Terry had been let go, but we had this trip planned for months. And Arizona, the University of Arizona, was coming to Chicago to play my favorite team, the University of Illinois, in a huge basketball game in December. And after the season ended, things didn't work out and Terry was let go. First thing he said was, we're still going on the trip, right? So we did. Of course, I did all the work. I got the hotel rooms, the plane tickets, the rental car. I set it all up. Wait, almost all the work.
I told you that I would get the tickets.
You had one job.
I had one job. Go ahead.
Right. So now, the day before, we get to the airport, and Philadelphia to fly to Chicago, and every flight is canceled. We had like one opportunity for one of us to go to Milwaukee, but we weren't going to split up. So finally, we got on a flight to Indianapolis, which is normally about a 3.5 hour drive to Chicago. We rented a car. It took us over 8 hours. Thankfully, Terry did all the driving. I don't think we went over 15 miles an hour. It was awful. We finally get to Chicago. We get to the front desk of the hotel. No tickets. The game starts at 11 o'clock in the morning. O'Hare Airport shut down. Those tickets aren't coming in. And, he's starting to feel a little bad about it. And I'm getting on him about it. And he said, I remember he said to me, he goes, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to call my friend, the ticket manager, and get myself one ticket to this game." And we were just about ready to go to the arena and try to buy tickets outside. If you recall, we were at the Westin Hotel, got into a cab, and a FedEx truck pulled by.
Remember, I jumped out of that cab?
He jumped out of that cab and yelled to the guy, "Do you have anything for Francona?" The guy didn't know who he was. He nodded his head, and there were the tickets.
I remember running through slush. I was so happy. I was so relieved because you kept telling me you have one job, and I messed it up.
But you got it done. In the end, you got it done. We get back in the cab. We go to the United Center, go to the game. My team happened to win that one, but we couldn't get a cab home. So we walked about 5 miles from the United Center back to the Westin Hotel, falling down in snow drifts, throwing snowballs at each other. One of the most fun trips I ever had.
Frankie, we walked through areas of Chicago that you're probably not supposed to.
That's right.
And I think there were probably people that looked at us throwing snowballs and like, you know what? We better not mess with them.
These guys are crazy. We had a great time. It would have been a terrific FedEx commercial.
Oh.
And if they knew then what they know now about you, that would have been a commercial.
Oh,
it was terrific. Had a great time. And the last story, since it's Thanksgiving time, I got to share this. So, and we pretty much talk about this every year around Thanksgiving. So the first year Terry's managing in Philly, he says, "What do you do for Thanksgiving?" And I was married then, and I had 2 kids. And I said, "Well, it's just the 4 of us. We either go out to eat or we just eat at home, something small." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "It's just my wife and kids and my dad and my sister." And he goes, "You guys want to come over for Thanksgiving?" So I'm like, "Sure." So we go over there, and Terry's wife was spending hours trying to get the Thanksgiving meal prepared. And, Terry and I and his dad, Tito, we're sitting around drinking beer, and we're eating every potato chip and pretzel in the house. And something's going wrong with the oven and the turkey, and it's getting later and later and later. And poor Jackie is just really struggling to pull this together, and company's there, so she's probably feeling even worse. Finally, it's time to sit down to this great Thanksgiving meal, and all the adults are around the big dining room table, and the kids are over there at the kids' table, and it's quiet. About 2 bites in, my son John, who was 3 at the time, bellows out at the top of his lungs, "This turkey sucks." And it was like the Southwest Airline commercial, "If you could fly away and go somewhere else, that's what I wanted to do," right after I killed him. And Terry and his dad were on the ground holding their sides laughing. Frankie, and finally everybody laughed.
I've never seen my dad laugh so hard. and you're right. I mean, I know we all, as we get older, think the stories are funny. That story, when we talk about it every Thanksgiving, I start laughing. I'll be sitting somewhere by myself and it'll pop into my head and I'll start laughing.
It's funny. And then, I got to tell this at the end of it. So in 2008, because they won the World Series in 07, Terry and his coaches he's the manager of the American League All-Star team. And they have a big red carpet parade now with all the manager and coaches and players and their wives. And in this case, it was going down 6th Avenue in New York. They were going to go down to Central Park and then get on buses and go to Yankee Stadium for batting practice in the game. Well, I had my 2 kids, John and Caitlin, standing on the street corner watching the parade. And all of a sudden, I hear them say, "Look, Dad, there's Mr. Francona." And there he was in the truck with Jackie and waving to the crowd. And we wave. And he sees us and orders the truck over to the side out of the middle of the street. And he yells out, "This turkey sucks." And people are looking at us like, "What's wrong with him? And do you know him?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we know him." And I said, "It's an inside joke. You'll never understand, but we'll never forget it as long as we live."
Ever.
Well, I just have one thing to say, and then we're at the end of our show. And besides saying thanks, and I really have been looking forward to doing this one because every time I talk to you, it makes me laugh. But I want to thank you for being my guest. And I just want to say, if you'll ever quit, I'll come to Cooperstown and see you in the Hall of Fame because you're a slam dunk. And I can't wait to be sitting up there watching you.
Oh, Frankie, thank you. You have no idea how much this meant to me. I mean, this is to me what's so good about baseball. And this is what I miss when I'm not around it, are the people. And I think people can probably tell by now how much fun we had. I mean, we every day something. I remember when I got my first glasses and I came in and I said, "Frankie, what do you think?" And you're like,
you're in a lot of trouble
because these people are going to be screaming like, "Franconio, now you see what we're seeing."
That's right.
You yelled at me just so I could get used to it.
I wanted to get you ready for it for that night. Anyway, buddy, it's been great. Thanks, have a great Thanksgiving to you and the family, and look forward to talking to you real soon. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being with us. Thanks for bearing with us a little bit extra today. And remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the Fans First Sports Network.
Good job, Frankie.
You too, buddy.
Wow, that was good.
It was fun.